Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis from Drone Camps RC, and today this video is dedicated to you, the subscriber. Thank you for subscribing over the years. We're going into our third year, so we're getting some weight under our belt. We're starting to get a lot of subscribers and a lot of companies helping us out. So I want to say thank you first and foremost to the subscribers that made this channel possible, and to my family that's supporting me behind the scenes, making all of this happen. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do any of this, you guys. Also to Rich Burton, my friend over at Hooperfly, he did an awesome job yesterday. He helped me the entire day so that we could film that action video for you guys specifically. I want to say thank you again to you, the subscriber. This video is definitely for you. Okay guys, here it is. A lot of you guys were asking for this video, so here it is. I hope that you are inspired by this video to create something for yourself on your own. Now, if you're not a skateboarder, I don't suggest doing this if you're not already like an experienced skateboarder. So it's a very dangerous project. Anyone under 18 would probably need parental supervision, and I don't take any responsibility for any of the crazy stuff you guys do out there. If you end up in the hospital or hurt or maimed, this is very dangerous. So keep that in mind. This project is not for people who don't have much experience with building RC or skateboarding. Wear all the proper safety equipment, blah blah blah. So anyway guys, very simple to build this. The power system alone was about $89. I'm using an airplane motor. Now originally I started out using a mini quad because I was like, hey, I could strap this to the back of the skateboard and it's 4 motors. It would be way more efficient for this project, but this didn't get me going very fast. 5 to 6 to 7 miles an hour wasn't quite fast enough for me. I wanted to be in that 15 to 20 mile an hour range. So I opted for an airplane motor setup with a 4S 16,000 mile battery, and that was the perfect power system for this Sector 9 skateboard. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you the hardware and the tools that you're gonna need to build this awesome prop powered skateboard. Now this will be a pretty cheap project to do if you have a lot of this stuff already. If you don't, it would probably be a pretty expensive project for you to attempt, because number one, you're going to need a pretty nice longboard, and something that's going to be 3 foot or longer is going to work the best. If you use something too short, you risk tipping over really easily and ending up with this huge 13-inch prop under your feet and legs. So you don't want that. If you use something shorter, I suggest using a metal fan protector. You want to have something at least 14 to 15 inches wide around this prop as it's spinning, because number one, if the skateboard tips over and hits the concrete like happened to me, this little fan shroud is going to save the plastic propeller from hitting and just disintegrating into the concrete. So pretty important that you use a 14 to 15 inch metal prop guard on here, which is going to be our prop guard for this project. And I suggest if you can get one with 2 sides to it to cover up the back and the front, that would be the safest way to do it, to keep it from coming in contact with you or anybody else. Now, next up on this list, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need some tools. So you're going to need, first off, you're going to need some 1/4 inch drill bits for your drill of choice. Whatever drill you use, that's fine. You're going to need some Velcro strap. If you go to Walgreens or somewhere, you can get a roll of this. This is to go around the lipo. You're also going to need some snips. You're going to need some pliers. You're going to need some ratchets. Probably going to fit the 1/4 inch bolt that we're going to use for tightening down the 2x4 through the skateboard. You're also going to need to drill 1/4 inch holes through the top of your skateboard, and I suggest putting 4 bolts through this base. Very important. Also going to need maybe a variety of screwdrivers, Phillips heads. You're going to need some needle nose pliers, and you're also going to need some scissors. I use 3M VHB for securing the receiver to the transmitter, running the power system. off on the top of the ESC, and I'll show you about that a little bit later. You also want some type of soldering iron to solder up an XT90 connector to your ESC. You can't use the XT30, it's too small, it'll actually melt. Because I already melted one, and this original 2.0 version, actually, the one before this one, this wire got very close to shorting out and catching on fire. So you don't want any fires while you're riding your board. You want to make sure that you use a thick gauge wire. Don't try to use 16 gauge or something like that. You're going to want to at least use 10 to 12 gauge wire, and you should have 10 to 12 gauge wire on your 4S 16,000 milliamp battery sitting over here that you can get from Hobby King. Additionally, you're going to need a roll of Velcro, and I just get this huge roll of Velcro from Home Depot. This is industrial strength Velcro, and it's nice because it's nice and wide, and this is what you're going to use to secure the battery to the board on the base of it and behind it, so that the battery doesn't rub on the screws on your vertical post. Very important, because those screws will actually, from the vibrations of the motor and the skateboard, the screws will rub through that battery and you'll have an instant fire. So you want to take care that you cover up all your hardware that's near the battery. Now I got fancy and I painted my 2x4 base. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. And I also painted this vertical post right here that's going to hold all the hardware for the ESC and the power combo up top. Now you're going to take a trip to the hardware store and you're going to get just a few pieces of hardware. It's pretty simple. You're going to get some 1/4 inch, and these are approximately 2 3/4 long by 1/4 inch thick. You'll also need some self-tightening nuts on there, the kind with the plastic inside it. You don't want to use the regular nuts that go on top of these because they'll come loose, and you don't have to use Loctite on these types. They'll stay tight. This is the kind of bolts they use on skateboards. A little smaller, but a nice self-locking nut is pretty important. Now you want to put 4 of these through this base. You want to do 2 here and 2 back here as well. I don't have my other 2 in yet, but I'm going to add that for extra safety. So you want this whole system to mount up right about where the axle of the back of the skateboard is. So you want this whole thing, the post should be riding right over top of where your back axle is. Now also you're going to want to get probably about 2.5 inch to 3 inch L brackets. You're going to need 2 L brackets to mount your vertical post to your base, and those need 8 screws total. So you want to get a couple smaller screws for that. Just fit those at the hardware store before you go home. Maybe bring a couple extra home just in case. But you'll use your drill to screw those down into the base, 4 down bottom and 4 to the main post. That keeps it from rocking back and forth or moving while you're having your motor powered up. Now also you want to take some Velcro and you want to go around the top of these screws and these L brackets to keep, and you could probably add a little bit of foam backing over top of these L brackets to make sure there's absolutely no connection or rubbing on the back of this 1600 milliamp battery. I also put another piece of Velcro here and a little piece of VHB across right here where those screws would eventually come to meet the back of this battery, because you want to have as much thickness between this and your hardware as possible so that those screws don't start to rub and wear through this battery casing. It would be a very bad day and cause a fire if it did rub through and metal made contact with the inside of this battery. It'd be an instant fire. Now also you're going to add a piece of Velcro on the bottom of this battery, and you're going to add one right across here where the battery is going to sit, and then the battery is going to sit on the mount this side down, this piece of Velcro back, and it will sit just like that. And this is a pretty optimal setup for this battery. It's nice and out of the way. I also mentioned that you guys are going to have to use XT90s on this connector because that'll handle the high voltage that this 60 amp ESC has to draw while pushing you down the street. Very important that you use this, and a nice thick gauge wire, like I was saying, probably something like a 10 to 12 gauge wire would be optimal. I also mentioned that longer piece of double-sided Velcro earlier, that spool that I showed you to get from Walgreens. Now we're going to take this, and this is going to go around the vertical post just underneath where the motor is, and it's going to come around, and you can put several of these on there. Be liberal with your Velcro strips around the entire apparatus. Like probably 2 of these would be plenty to hold it on there, because you also have holding it on the bottom and on that vertical mounted post right there. Now this base is pretty simple to build, and the vertical post, all it is 2x4s. It's actually 5 inches long for the base and 12 inches tall for the vertical mount. Go ahead and cut yourself 2 of those. After you have your hardware, go ahead and get your drill out, and you're going to drill 4 holes in this base. Now I suggest going ahead and putting your L brackets on first and getting these secured, the base and the vertical post, and then you're going to add these sort of countersink screws through in the front, and you want 3 of those through into the base of the mount. Now these screws right here, they measure out at about 2 3/4 inches long to get a nice secure solid screw through to that base. Pretty important. Now also another tip for putting on your main bolts that are going to hold your base down, after you have your L brackets on, you don't have a lot of space here to put your extra 2 on there. Now I don't have mine mounted yet, but I will, and make sure you use washers on both sides. So get 1/4 inch washers at the hardware store along with your bolts that are going to go through. So you're going to have one here, one here, one here, and one here. So use your 1/4 inch drill bit to drill 4 holes in the base right here, and that will definitely secure the base down to the board. Now the next step is you're going to mount your metal fan prop guard. I have a 14-inch metal fan shroud here for my prop guard on my motor assembly. Now this is pretty important that you get it at least a couple inches down here off the deck so that it's not hitting the deck or vibrating against the deck. And mine's actually measuring at this top part right here where I have a bolt through to screw through to mount to the 2x4. It's about 10 inches right there. So if you leave a couple inches from the top where your mount is going to go through into the 2x4, you should have the perfect setup. Now also you want to measure the distance between here and here to make sure that it's absolutely dead center on your 2x4. Now you can paint yours or you can leave it whatever color it was when you bought it, no big deal, but just go to a local thrift store somewhere and pick up a fan, measure it in the thrift store, and make sure that it's going to fit this 13-inch prop setup. Now as far as mounting the motor, I have a couple tips for you to mount your motor to your vertical stand. It's pretty simple, but there is a rotating collar on the back side of this motor. It's an outrunner motor, and you're going to need to make sure that that rotating collar doesn't come in contact with the wood on the 2x4. So what I did, and you can use a regular drill bit to try to get it drilled out to about a 1/2 inch around, or you can use one of these types of drill bits. They'll just make a nice solid 1/2 inch hole for you for that collar to slide down into, and when you mount it, make absolutely sure that it's not rubbing up against the 2x4. If you want to go a little bigger and do a 5/8, you could also do that. 3/4 inch would probably be overkill. Now the mounting hardware that you're going to want to use to mount your X plate to the vertical post is 3/4 inch screw. Also get a handful of those at the hardware store, and take your motor plate with you to the hardware store to make sure that you have some screws that match up with the holes for this motor mount. And then you're just going to simply run the motor wires through and out and behind this post. Okay, so we're going to talk about this prop real quick, but you're not going to put this on until you're absolutely finished with your power system because you're going to need to test motor direction. Now we're going to talk about this real quick, but motor direction is very important. This motor has to spin to the right. Now you want to test that with the prop off, obviously, with your transmitter over here and your receiver all set up. You also want to add a throttle cut to this, because before you turn everything on, you want to make sure that throttle cut is on. When you're ready on the board, go ahead and still have throttle cut activated. Go ahead and give yourself 2 or 3 pushes on your board to get yourself up on a plane, and then you're going to hit throttle cut and turn on your motor, activate the motor, and you can go ahead and power up and skate off. Now it's very important, the direction, like I said, it has to turn to the right, and traditionally this motor is going to turn to the left on an airplane. So what I did was I reversed the props, and I also reversed the motor direction. Now the way you reverse motor direction is very simple. There's 3 wires back here that plug into the ESC, and those are all bullet plugs, so you can just unplug them and swap them. Now you're going to swap 2 wires until you get the motor to turn to the right. Obviously make sure that you don't have any propeller on here when you're doing that inside the shop. So if you're outside, that's fine, but this prop goes on just like this. If I take this little nose cone off right here, it just screws right off, and this is mostly for looks, this little nose cone, but it is very important, the base of it, this is what holds the prop on the prop nut assembly. You have 3 screws that go through here, and underneath this plate right here, you have 1 more screw underneath. So there's 2 screws holding each prop in place. Now also, like I said, this has to turn to the right. So you're going to take these props and flip them around backwards the other way so that this leading edge is leading in this direction as it's turning right. Very important, because that's going to give you thrust this direction. It's going to push instead of pulling. Generally on the airplanes, we have it pulling this way. So we're actually going to create, on the back of the board, a pusher prop with that setup. So now you should be to the point where you're ready to mount up your ESC on top of this vertical post. And what I did was I took a piece of Velcro, the soft part, and put it on the very bottom to kind of cushion this ESC on the top of the vertical mount. Now what I also did was took that hard piece and put on the bottom of here, and then I ran a zip tie around this whole assembly. Now if you want to do this, the best and most secure way is go ahead and put a 1/4 inch hole through here and run your zip tie through the hole, through the 2x4 and up and around this assembly, and snip this piece off right here. Also using a piece of VHB in between your receiver and the ESC to firmly hold this ESC. You don't want this moving anywhere. And also guys, if you're using a larger spectrum transmitter, a receiver, you're going to want to make sure this antenna wire is secured somewhere underneath a piece of Velcro or VHB, so it doesn't go back into this fan and prop assembly right here, because it'll eat that antenna up. Now you also want to mount on the back side right here with a piece of Velcro. Go ahead and mount your battery checker right there, your volt checker, right on the vertical post, so you can have easy access to plug that in and check it about every 5 minutes is great. So also another tip for your fan shroud guys, whatever one you get from the hardware store, make sure it has an opening big enough that you can get about a finger by this 2x4 right here, because you don't want these wires to rub on anything or have any kind of abrasion during operation. You don't want to have a short out during the operation of this whole power system. It would be pretty catastrophic. So now you should be to the point where you can go ahead and bind up your receiver to your transmitter. Just make an airplane model in there and call it electric skateboard or whatever you want to call yours, and go ahead and do the bind process. Now the bind process on Spectrum is pretty easy. You can find it on YouTube. All you have to do is power on your ESC with a bind plug in the receiver, and then turn on your radio and hold down the bind button. Now that's the way it works with the DX8. It might work differently with any newer models than what I have right here. Now another tip for this FMS ESC, if I didn't say this earlier in the video, absolutely make sure that you program your ESC. It's going to have to be programmed, because when you turn everything on, you're just going to hear a beep emit from the motor, and some guys get confused and they think, oh well, my ESC is bad, I have to send this back to FMS because they sent me a bad ESC. No, it just has to be programmed to be able to arm, and that's a very simple process. All you have to do is go ahead and turn on your transmitter first, put your throttle stick at maximum, and then plug in your battery to your ESC. Now you're going to hear it emit some beeps, and when it emits some beeps after about 5 seconds, you're going to return the throttle down to the 0 position like I just did there, and then you'll hear another series of beeps, and you'll hear the startup chime after that. And when you hear the startup chime, your throttle is now engaged and active, and you can get your motor spinning. Now one last most important tip is make sure you definitely have throttle cut set up on your radio. I don't know if I mentioned this several times before, but I probably did. When you start up your radio, you want to make sure that throttle cut is on your gear channel, and that when you have your switch, all your switches should be all the way back when you fire up your Spectrum transmitter. If not, your transmitter will start beeping really furiously, and it'll make you return all your switches to the back position, and your throttle should be at 0. Now for your throttle cut switch, I said to use the gear channel, this longer switch right here, and you want to make sure that 0 is the off position, so that when you fire everything up, so that you have throttle cut active as you power everything up, because you don't want to accidentally hit this and have this thing go flying off or injure yourself. So very important that you have that set up. Now I'll just go ahead and plug in the battery for you, and make sure that you turn on your transmitter first, stick down at 0, all your switches away, go ahead and plug in your XT90, and now you hear it start to beep. You'll hear a series of beeps here. Now that's the beeps you're going to hear before you program it. That second series of beeps is what you're going to hear when it's actually armed and engaged. Now, if I have my throttle set up correctly, I won't have any throttle. My throttle cut is actually armed right now, so I have 0 throttle. This is great if you're skating and you get into a situation where you need to stop all power. Flip that switch back to 0 away from you, and bam, you cut your motor off. So that's super important to do that. Now also, when you're ready to arm it, go ahead and give yourself a couple kicks on the board, get yourself up on the plane, 2 or 3 kicks, maybe 5 to 6 miles an hour, and then go ahead and flip your throttle and start to engage your motor slowly, bring it up to speed. And then you're free to go ahead and enjoy your prop-powered skateboard. So thanks again for watching this video. This is a pretty easy system to build, and it was a lot of fun, but highly dangerous, so I don't recommend this to just anyone. So be careful out there. Please do show me what you create. If you create one, I'd love to see your video, so please share it with everybody else. Thanks again for watching Drone Camps. I'm Justin Davis.